brought up this good point about air conditioning. I'm like you. I grew up in the Midwest. We had a window unit only in our I think it was in our kitchen or our living room. And I remember on hot nights like this, we would all like sleep on the floor in the living room because it wouldn't get back to the bedrooms. It was so hot. But you make a good point. A lot of folks didn't have air conditioning for a long time. I think now the penetration is like 96 or 98% of the country. It's pretty crazy. But growing up in the Midwest, there's something else that you brought up that I was familiar with. I know you're familiar with it, but a lot of folks in the South aren't familiar with, and it's corn sweat. So we talked about this going in, and people were like, what the heck is corn sweat? Well, the technical term is evapotranspiration. Say that 3 times. But talk a little bit about this and why folks in the Midwest have some similarities to folks in the South, because they deal with crazy humidity as well, but for a completely different reason.
This is one of those topics that, for whatever reason, it seems like it comes around on social media now. Every couple of years, corn sweat becomes the buzzword for like a week or even a month. And so if you're watching and you've never heard about this, I get it. It's not something we see a lot of here in North Carolina, but it's very, very interesting. What happens, and the basic science of this is that plants, they need to cool themselves off as well. And when we talk about things like the corn belt, for example, where are the areas of the country that are growing the most corn? It's not here. We have some, but it is those places that you stereotypically would think of. It's Big Ten football country. You've got Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois. You ever drive in those areas and you get that flat land and you just see corn as far as the eye can see? There's an incredible corn density. Yep. And so these plants, they do kind of live and breathe, kind of like people. And when they're exhaling water vapor. And this contributes to the surrounding climate and the surrounding air in a way that's a little bit more pronounced when it's already hot outside, because just like us, they need to cool down too. And this is something that it is not something I knew a lot about. So I was just researching this a little bit over the last couple of days. But believe it or not, an acre of corn can release about 3,000 to 4,000 gallons of water per day.
Yeah.
So it's adding all that to the atmosphere. It's adding all of that to your air that you're breathing in these Midwest climates. And shockingly, it can raise the dew point maybe an extra 5 degrees, maybe even 10 degrees higher than it would be otherwise. Just depends on every situation. But we talk about 70 degrees as being a crazy high dew point, normally. And it's normal around here, but that's an uncomfortable dew point. Up there in Iowa, sometimes you can get 80-degree dew points, and they're not on the Gulf. They're not in the Florida Keys. They're in Iowa, and they're sweating this thing out. This is have you ever experienced this? Because I don't know if I have necessarily.
Yeah. So I grew up in Ohio. We have a lot of sweet corn, but nothing like Indiana or Illinois. Like I've done that drive from Columbus, Ohio to Des Moines, Iowa on 70. Oh my gosh, You feel like you're not moving because there's just corn everywhere. And when this time of year, the corn's really tall, and it just takes over everything. And those giant leaves, like the leaves are gigantic, and they just produce so much moisture. Corn is also a very water-intensive crop, meaning it takes a lot of water to grow corn, and because of that, a lot of it gets expelled. But and my family's from Chicago, so they're familiar with this in the Chicago area because Northern Illinois gets this. Whereas you mentioned, Tim, I'm looking at the dew points right now in central Illinois, near St. Louis to Champaign. It's like 78, 79 degree dew points. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and it does affect the local climate there, as you mentioned, and actually does promote higher Cape values and sometimes can produce storms. So it's a really fascinating phenomenon. And if you hear anybody from Minnesota or Iowa or Chicago, they'll complain about humidity. And if you're from the South, you think, oh, no, you know what you're talking about. Trust me, there are points, especially late summer before the harvest, that they know exactly what we're talking about in the South. They just deal with it in a very smaller window. And it definitely happens about this time of year until about August. That's typically when we see it. But, crazy to see that be a big issue. And you're right, it always becomes a talker about this time every year.
It's always interesting, and I think back to maybe when I was a kid and I was getting interested in weather. We only heard about weather through a couple-minute segments on the news every now and then.
Yeah.
Now there are all these talking points all the time on social media.
That's a good point.
And more weather phenomenon that are smaller get more widespread acclaim, and sometimes they catch on like fire. And corn sweat is interesting, it's weird sounding, and it's a real impact. And so you mentioned, I was just going to ask you as a follow-up, the peak it would be right about now through August is kind of the peak of this impact for them?
Yeah, typically when we would harvest the corn in Ohio, because I mean it's one of my favorite things. The only thing I miss about the Midwest, honestly, is probably the sweet corn, because it's unbelievable. I brought it back to a bunch of cookouts down here, and people are like, "Where does this corn from?" Because it's so huge, and it's just when I say sweet corn, you eat this stuff, it is like pure sugar. It is like unbelievable. That's where corn syrup comes from, by the way. It is so rich in sugars. But about mid-August, right before we go back to school, there would always be these big carnivals and festivals, and that was the big thing, was to go get fresh sweet corn that was just harvested. They'd grill it on the grill. They'd have a coffee can with melted butter in it, and you dip the whole thing in there, and you just walk around with ears of corn eating at the fair. It was just, I loved it. It was delicious. So when I think corn sweat, I think two things. I'm sweating for sweet corn myself because I want it, but also the evapotranspiration. So,
Tim, I just want to check. Did he ever bring you any of this corn? Because he never brought any of this corn to me.
That's going to be my next thing. I'm going to bring down, because and the crazy thing, it's so cheap, Tim. Like all these little farmer markets on the corners of streets, it's like 24 ears of corn for like $2. You go to like the local Harris Teeter or something here, and that costs you like $10. So it is amazing. But yeah, corn was a big part of my life growing up, because I lived in I don't want to say I lived in the country, but I lived kind of the edge of the country, the urban country interface, we'll call it. And that's what a lot of my friends do. In fact, one of my high school buddies owns Soleil's sweet corn farm in Summit County, Ohio, and he took up the family farm and grows it up there. So it definitely brings back a lot of great memories. And it is, this time of year, it is nuts. We used to have a saying, I think it was knee high by the 4th of July, is what the corn was supposed to be.
Yes, that's right.
And then it was tasseled out about this time, and then you harvest it like mid-August. So so it's an interesting topic that we got into, and I know a lot of folks here are kind of interested, and especially people that are in agriculture. I think they understand it. You're right. In North Carolina, I think we do grow a lot of corn, but it's feed corn mostly, not the kind that humans eat around here.
Well, this segment was brought to you by the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. If you'd like to travel there,
yes,
you now have a reason.
Fill up your tank with ethanol for us. We'll be very happy for you. I'm telling you, well, it's if that's the most exciting thing you do in Ohio, you're really living it up. Because that and telling my kids I did cow tipping as a kid, that was the other thing. They were shocked I did that in high school when I was a dumb high school kid. If you don't know what cow tipping is, we'll have another show on that at some other point. But that's something we did in high school as well.